Hello, and welcome to the Brokenomics of Christmas. Now, in this episode, I'm going to basically try and explain why everything that you think you know about Christmas is wrong. So, first of all, I want to obviously prove that Santa is real. We know this using COVID logic, so that will make a lot of sense to everybody. I want to explain why giving Christmas gifts is a very bad idea and you shouldn't do it. Very economically inefficient, that. I want to do a bit on Christmas trees, and also let's talk about why you should have a KFC for Christmas. And actually, Ebenezer Scrooge was the good guy. So, hopefully you're up for this. Let's get into the first part, which I promised, which is obviously why Santa is real. And you are, in fact, a conspiracy theorist if you don't believe me. Now, I'm going to prove this with COVID logic. So anybody who took COVID seriously and spent those 2 years wandering around wearing, a double mask or whatever, this will resonate with you strongly. But I simply ask you this. What is more realistic? Is it that that Santa flies around and delivers presents to millions of children all over the world, or that there's some massive conspiracy, some massive global conspiracy that every adult in the Western world is a part of, where they basically trick you into believing that that Santa is real? I mean, obviously, a global conspiracy on that level couldn't possibly hold up to scrutiny. Now, I'll also note, you don't hear any adults on TV saying that Santa isn't real, do you? Exactly. Now, some skeptical kids might say, well, that's because you ban all of the other adults who say that Santa isn't real. You don't give them the platform, and therefore you create the illusion that Santa is real by not allowing anybody else to speak against it. I want to refute that logic, because obviously that isn't real, because journalism is honest and good. So there you go. Right, second point. Another kid might say, well, actually, look, what you can't do, you can't just look at the fact that these gifts turn up, because yes, okay, we acknowledge that, presents do arrive at the bottom of the bed, or, the Christmas, the chimney or whatever, on Christmas Day. You can't just look at that as proof. What you've actually got to do is look at total parental gift spending throughout the season, and then see if it's netted off against that Santa gifts. So basically, the only measure that you can use to actually track this is total mortality. You can't just reclassify flu and then... Oh, hang on, sorry, no, I've gone side. You can't just... Yes, you can't just point to the fact that there are presents. You have to look at whether presents is simply a subset of parental gifting. Ignore what I said before. And as long as that is consistent, so actually what you need to track is total parental gifting over 2019, 2020, 2021 and 2022, when there was a big panic that everybody was bad that year and they needed to be locked in their houses. Anyway, on to the next bit. And for God's sakes, let's get this bit bloody... God, it's hot, that. Oh, that's very itchy. Hang on. 1 minute. Okay, now, the main thrust of this Brokenomics is I want to convince you that you shouldn't give Christmas presents anymore. That might sound a bit Scroogey, but no, it's very true. There has been a devolution, hasn't there, of over the years to these sort of filler gifts that you get now. You can go on Amazon and you can type in, gifts for, I don't know, mid-20s male or, early 40s female or something like that, and you get a whole selection of these rubbish filler gifts that are probably going to be thrown away. And genuinely, that does happen. So I saw a study come out in 2017 that showed that the Americans throw away $16 billion worth of unwanted Christmas gifts. So, I mean, if that is not an economic inefficiency, I don't know what is. I'm going to tell you about a study from a nice chap called Joel Wolfog. Oh, I might be pronouncing that wrong. Who basically looked at the average spending that people did on Christmas presents. It turned out to be about $313. And then he calculated what was that actually worth to the people who received it. And basically, it turns out that it was $125 less than was actually spent. So that is what we call the deadweight loss in economics of that spending. Now, normally the way things works in purchasing decisions is that you get much more value than the price that you pay. Now, I'll give you an extreme example. Let's say that your kid has an earache, an ear infection or something, and they're crying with pain. What would you actually pay to alleviate that suffering? I mean, you pay like, I don't know, £200 or dollars or whatever to get a medicine to calm your child, wouldn't you? But what you actually pay is something like, I don't know, £9 or something like that, because it's relatively cheap. If you don't have kids or you just don't like them, the other option would be broadband, for example. So I mean, if you ask, just think about it for yourself. What would you, if you, what was the maximum that you would pay if it meant that you did or didn't get broadband? I mean, most people would pay, again, into the hundreds of dollars, but again, it costs something like, 20, 30, 40, something like that. So the normal thing in purchasing decisions is that you get more value than you actually pay out for things, and thus the decision is made. And I'll prove to you quite comprehensively why that simply doesn't happen most of the time, and we should abolish this shameful practice. Really, what I think it's all about is it's all about sort of getting a dopamine hit for the person giving the gifts, because you must have all had that experience where you've got a child or a young nephew or something like that, and you give them a Christmas present, and the little faces light up and they're so excited. I mean, I remember I got a Nintendo NES when I was like, I don't know, 9 or 10 or something like that. And I was absolutely ecstatic, bouncing around the room, because now I could play Duck Hunt and Elite and SimCity and stuff like that. So I was very pleased. In fact, Xanadu, I like that. And I think a lot of the time people are trying to recreate the dopamine hit of when they gave a kid a great gift and they freaked out about it. But that's not actually what's happening. In fact, we know that Christmas gifts are not a luxury good. So, I mean, a quick tangent, but another thing in economics is there are different types of goods that are observed: inferior goods, normal goods, and luxury goods. And basically, the way that works is as your wealth grows, you spend less on the inferior goods, you spend more, but proportionally less, on the normal goods, and you spend more on the luxury goods. So a good example of this might be, thin gruel. As you get wealthier, your spending on thin gruel or low quality food diminishes quite rapidly. Bread is perhaps a normal good that you spend more on it, but the proportion of your spending drops. And steak is a luxury good where you spend more on it as you become wealthier or whatever your thing is. Christmas gifts, we know basically that the spending on Christmas gifts goes up by about half the growth in the economy. So if the economy grows 4x, you expect to see the spending on Christmas presents going up about 2x. So I mean, it implies that it's a normal good, but certainly not a luxury good. Just giving a bit of background to this before I get into the paper I really want to talk about. Now, also, as a way of background to all of this, let's talk about a bloody good economist, Milton Friedman. He talked about an idea, it's not just an idea, it's very observable, but the different types of spending that can take place. Famously, he said that the best form of spending is when you spend your own money on yourself. Right? And that's because you are likely to consider both the cost and the benefit of the purchase, and therefore you're going to create value whenever you make a purchase for the reasons I established before. We will only spend money if it gives you greater value than it costs you in the purchase. So therefore value is created through that transaction. He then went to talk about the less good forms of spending. So the next is spending someone else's money on yourself. Now, in this case, you don't care so much about the cost, but you do very much care about the benefit. And a good example of this would be if any of you have a business expense account. You will, if you can, you'll buy the first class ticket when you're sent abroad rather than the economy ticket because you get the benefit and you're not particularly bothered about the cost of it. But at least there is still some value created in that transactions. The next form, which he talked about, was spending someone else's money on someone else. Now that is the worst example here. So this is basically all of government spending. When you're taking money that you didn't earn, you don't care about the benefit because you're not getting the benefit from it. You don't care about the cost. So basically all of government spending. So those are the different forms. Well, I suppose there's also spending someone else's, spending your own money on somebody else, which is the example that we want to talk about here. So in this case, you're less concerned about the benefit because you won't be the one using it, but you are concerned about the cost. This relates to what we're going to talk about here with gift giving. Now, anyway, we also need to talk about, whenever we look at gift spending, what are we comparing it to? The reason I'm heading this up is we're about to talk about a bloody bad economist, John Maynard Keynes. But basically, the Keynesians, which I will come to, they basically see all spending as good. So for them, Christmas is absolutely excellent because you get that sort of December bump in sales. The correct way to look at this is not, is there a bump in December, but what would the spending have been absent a Christmas? Which we don't know because, actually, you can know it because you can look at countries like Israel, for example, or basically any country which is broadly similar in spending patterns to Christian Western nations that have broadly comparable lifestyles who don't celebrate Christmas. And in those countries, basically spending in November and January is much higher, even though December is lower. So the total amount of spending throughout the year doesn't actually change, per capita by any great amount. But what does happen is you don't get that lumpiness, that seasonality in the demand over a very sort of narrow and constrained time period, which as a result means that you need to invest less in logistical capacity. And therefore, the money that is spent on logistics goes down, and there is a smoothing and a more efficient use of this. So for multiple reasons, Austrian economists generally don't like Christmas because it's just rather inefficient. So let's talk about bad economists. For Keynesians, you see, they only care about spending. It's line go up for them. So Christmas is fantastic. They don't worry about wasteful spending because for them, the idea of wasteful spending is, they just don't really even consider it. In fact, Keynes once semi-joked, and he was only semi-joking, that the government should pay people to dig holes and then fill them up again. So basically, his thinking there is that it injects money into the economy. Those people will then receive those wages. They go off and spend them. They call this the multiplier effect, which will in turn generate more economic activity because it's all about spending. Austrians think that this line of thought is complete madness because is the spending being put towards a productive use that will contribute to further growth in the economy later on. Whereas the Keynesians, they just simply think that the spending itself is ultimately good. Right. Having set up that premise, let's jump into this. So this is a paper by Joel Waldvogel, if I've got that pronunciation right. A very influential paper, created a lot of discussion when it came out in 1993, which is called The Deadweight Loss of Christmas. Interesting title. Now, basically, his thesis revolves around the concept of dead loss in Christmas giving. Quick example of dead loss, right? Let's say that a small town has 50 million to spend, and with that they can either invest in a school or a bridge. Both of those cost 50 million. The school, if you build it, will basically create 25 million in benefit to the town, spread out over its lifetime, whereas the bridge will contribute 75 million in benefit over its lifetime. So, the deadweight loss in this case, and actually economists will go further than simply looking at the fact that you spent 50 and you got 25 in benefit. So they would consider it beyond a 25 million deadweight loss. They would actually look at the opportunity cost as that you could have had the bridge that would have returned 75 million in value, and therefore the deadweight loss is 50 million. So having explained the deadweight loss concept, the deadweight loss is basically all over Christmas gift spending. And so the central argument is basically Christmas gift giving is inefficient. It's largely inefficient because in economics, information has value. And one of the things that he observes quite strongly from this is that basically the lower amount of information that you have on the recipient, the larger the deadweight spending problem. So, for example, when partners who live together and talk every day, when they buy each other gifts, the deadweight loss is relatively low. In fact, it's even possible that the gift would create value, like normal spending when you're spending money on yourself. That can often be the case, that the value is created for the purchase. But by the time you get out to grandparents and second cousins and your in-laws and stuff like that, the loss is ramps up quite significantly, and that leads to purchases being made where significant value is lost, and then it results in, as we saw earlier, Americans throwing away 16 billions in gifts. So what the study showed is basically consistently recipients valued the gifts that they received much lower than the actual cost, indicating that there had been a loss in economic value occurring. So the paper, I'll come to this more later, but the paper has been criticised for not including intangibles such as the emotional and social aspect of gift giving. However, that doesn't really do anything to displace the economic efficiency aspect of this. So how did he do it? Basically, so he was a university professor, and he used a survey-based methodology to gather the efficiency of gifts, primarily based on his students. And what he did is he said, okay, take the sample of gifts that you received this Christmas, and for each gift, note how much it costs to buy, but also tell me how much you would have to be paid to be willing to part with that gift. And then comparing the price of what they could be separated from that gift for and the actual the value of the two gave him the deadweight loss between the two. Now, this study was mostly college students, so it did provide a very convenient sample for this, but it wasn't necessarily broadly representative of the population of a whole, because of course not everybody is a young university student. There tends to be they tend to be a fairly homogeneous group in sort of lifestyle aspects that wouldn't be represented across the whole population. Anyway, so consistently they valued the gifts less than was actually spent, and it came out as something like a third. Yes, well I told you the average was 313, and there was an economic loss of 125 on this. So about 33% was the economic overall destruction occurred by the gift giving, and it varied significantly, like I said, depending on the degrees of separation between yourself and the person who was giving the gifts as to how much information that they had on you. He also noted, interestingly, that I think people are aware of that destruction value, because the further removed an individual is from you, the more likely you are to receive cash or gift cards or something like that. This is something you probably experienced for yourself. It is very unlikely that your romantic partner is going to give you money as a Christmas present, but your in-laws or aunts, uncles, cousins are far more likely to give you gift cards or straight up cash, because they have that lower information. They don't know necessarily what you want. So the reason this paper caused such a stir is because it upset the traditional view that gift giving was an economic good. It provided a December boost to the economy. It led to a big seasonal bump, and a lot of retailers rely on it, and therefore generally, especially by Keynesian economists, it was seen as somewhat heretical. When it came out in 1993, sparked a lot of debate. Joel was invited onto TV quite a lot, alongside very annoyed other economics professors who came out to argue that no, actually, it was a good thing after all. Now, the idea for me is the implications coming out of this paper was essentially that gifts needed to become more economically efficient, and the way that he was sort of suggesting doing it at the time was gift cards, because of course that was a bit more of a thing in 1993. And at least it raised awareness amongst consumers about the potential inefficiencies of their spending, and hopefully that would lead to people to either put a little bit more thought into the value of their gifts, or to switch over to cash or cards for people that you're less close to. Or I would make the argument that if it's not immediate family, just don't buy gifts. I mean, just keep it to a close group, and focus on them where you have the most information.
To watch the full video, please become a premium member at lotuseaters.com.